How did a South Korean band, whose songs are primarily not in English, break into the Western music scene? Why did they end up dominating the global music market with only a few English language hit songs and the majority of their musical catalog in Korean and even Japanese? Beneath such questions is a presumption about the disposability of pop music, as well as the perception of K-pop as a manufactured formulaic genre. While my talk today does not aspire to definitively answer such questions, what I want to do instead is to identify and explore more closely what, to me, stands out as an essential factor in BTS's success as both artists and celebrities. That is, their ability to compel fans to engage with their music, performances, and other content repeatedly. It is this repeated encounter, I propose, that not only leads to greater fan engagement and immersion, but also highlights the complex artistry of their music and lyricism. When fans linger over BTS's lyrics and then watch a live performance, they are encountering the same song in varying mediums. They are, whether consciously or not, rereading or re-experiencing the song from another perspective, whether the perspective of dance, choreography, or movement. Now, scholars such as Candace Epps Robertson have characterized the appeal of BTS as that of an invitational rhetoric. That is, a rhetoric which foregrounds and facilitates the understanding of other perspectives. My talk extends the notion of invitational rhetoric by drawing on the tools of narrative theory to show how this increase in perspectival acuity applies not only to transcultural understanding, but also to aesthetic perception. That is, BTS and big hit music facilitate the fan's ability to critically read and discern the multiple layers and narrative complexity of their music across different media, platforms, and content. In short, I am suggesting that listening to BTS's music and watching their content do not simply lead the audience to become passive consumers, as some might assume with pop music. Rather, it can cultivate and expand the fan's interpretive capacity. In this talk, I'll be looking at music and content from 2020 to 2021, before BTS's solo projects and before their mandatory military service, since this is the last time period in which all 7 members participated collectively as a unit. I will identify and examine 2 different strategies that define how this process works. First, for the fans who are absorbing and receiving the musical content, and secondly, for the producers and creators of such content, that is, BTS and big hit music. The first comprises what I call the cumulative layering of interpretive meaning, especially for non-Korean fans. That is, the distributed temporal process in how fans absorb and engage with BTS's music. The second is the asynchronous release of Bangtangbom's Run BTS episodes, which is their variety show, and other content. Big hit music notoriously delays the release of behind-the-scenes episodes of the band long after events have occurred, sometimes almost a year post-date. While some of what determines this choice is pragmatic, I will argue that its impact on fan engagement is to compel rewatching, reviewing, and connecting to other platforms such as Twitter, live on Weverse, and on YouTube in order for fans to more fully immerse in both the members' lives and their music production process. Ultimately, my talk suggests that the ways big hit music and BTS engage viewers, listeners, and fans is not only an affective parasocial relationship, but can also be an increased intellectual engagement as well. So what do I mean when I say there's a cumulative layering of interpretive meaning? I use this phrase to refer to the process by which fans, especially non-Korean fluent ones, encounter BTS's music, which unfolds diachronically. That is, we begin by hearing their music, reading their lyrics, often based on fan translations, and then watching a performance of the song. What I want to emphasize here is both the multiple encounters with BTS's music and that this occurs in different modalities throughout the process. So if we take Jimin's solo song, Filter, from the Map of the Soul 7 album as a case in point, we can track more closely how this process works. When fans first hear the song, they engage with it sonically, noticing its Latin-leaning beat, guitar picks, and Jimin's voice, which sounds tonally different than his previous solo songs, such as Serendipity and Lie. Now, this first aural encounter, along with the title, conveys some impression of the song's mood. When I first heard Filter, I thought it sounded upbeat, maybe a bit provocative. Yet it isn't until we look at the lyrics that another layer of meaning emerges. As a non-Korean fluent fan, I rely on the dedicated and amazing labor of fan translations. And I will often read several translations in order to better understand the meaning. So when we look at the lyrics of Filter, there is some interpretive ambiguity. Is this an empowering or sad song? Is Jimin singing about the fluidity of his identity and persona? Or is there lingering sadness about how he is trying to meet the different projections that fans put on him? Is there implicit critique or mournfulness? Is he claiming this as a strength? This second encounter with the song introduces more complex themes and ideas into what initially may have sounded simply as an upbeat, seductive song. And then we have the Map of the Soul 1 concert's Filter performance, which adds yet another layer of meaning and interpretive possibility. The performance itself is filled with interpretive choices in wardrobe, choreography, and movement, such as the way he takes on and off the accessories of the mannequin. And these choices both delimit and enable certain interpretive possibilities. Overall, the performance, to me, highlights the agency of Jimin, that he is in control of the persona he projects to fans, which can be fluid and seemingly indeterminate, but ultimately asserts his own power. In the words of Lenica Cruz's review of the song, she writes, "Filter contains profound lyrics embedded with a nuanced critique of fame and perception." And I argue that this interpretation only emerges gradually, as if each element, the sonic aural, the cognitive aspect of engaging with the translation of the lyrics, and then finally the visual performative register, cumulatively builds meaning layer by layer with each encounter. And it is the repeated encounter with the song in the different modalities that actually reinforces and expands the interpretive possibility of the song's content, which then facilitates deeper fan appreciation and connection. I want to add here that this may seem counterintuitive, but I think the Korean lyrics actually enables and facilitates greater interpretive engagement for international fans. That is to say, the fact that we cannot understand the lyrics upon first listen paradoxically makes BTS's artistry and lyricism more visible because it compels re-examination and re-engagement beyond that first listen. YouTube reactors to BTS music often serve as a great example of this. Many reactor videos contain reactions to the song itself, then another reaction to the lyrics, and a final reaction to the live performance. Now, I don't mean to suggest that this process cannot happen with English lyrics or any language that is our mother tongue. But I think there is a temptation to take for granted or presume that we can absorb both sound and meaning in the same listen because of fluency. My point is, for BTS's music, because of the language difference for non-Korean fluent fans, this cumulative interpretive process becomes more explicit. I will now move to my second point, this asynchronous release of BTS content. BTS have stated many times that music and performance form the core of their identity as a group. And we've just looked at how the two reinforce each other through a cumulative layering of meaning that leads to increased fan immersion, engagement, and ultimately expanded interpretive possibility. I will now shift attention to their content beyond music and performance to identify that the same consequence, facilitating and compelling repeated interaction with their material, occurs even in the ways that big hit music structures their distribution of non-musical content. Whereas the fullness of interpretive meaning in BTS's music and performance emerges through cumulative, repeated encounters in varying modalities, their other content, I argue, also facilitates repeated interaction through the asynchronous release of such content. Put simply, I'm referring to how big hit music often releases footage or video of the BTS members after the fact of when an event has occurred. So here, let me pause and draw from narrative theory to help me better illustrate the two different temporalities I will be discussing. Literary critics usually distinguish between story and discourse when describing fictional narratives. That is, we differentiate between events that occur in chronological order as the story, what actually happened and when, versus how those events are presented to us, what we refer to as the discourse. Often, when we read a novel, what is first presented discursively, such as the opening chapter of the book, is usually not the first actual chronological event in the story. This often occurs in visual narratives as well, where the opening scene or episode might be of a moment that occurs later in the actual timeline of story events, yet the director chose to present it first for a certain artistic effect. The most essential distinction between story and discourse to note here is the asymmetry of time, making us aware that what we encounter as the narrative unfolds is not the same as what actually happened in the story timeline. Rather, each encounter always invokes multiple timelines, and we can only glean and abstract the real actual story timeline from the discourse itself. We can never access it directly. This distinction between story and discourse is helpful for analyzing how BTS's social media platforms operate, which often contain and constantly invoke the multiple temporalities of past and present that eagle-eyed fans can detect almost instantly. For example, on Bangtan TV, BTS's YouTube channel, short videos of each individual member delivering a video call to fans while singing along to their song Life Goes On were released on February 20th, 2021. Fans quickly noted that the clothes in these videos were the same as those that they wore for the 2020 Melon Music Awards Dynamite Dance Break practice video, which was uploaded to Bangtan TV on December 19th, 2020. Based on the members' clothes and hairstyles, fans also pointed out that the Dynamite Dance Break practice video seemed to be filmed on the same day that BTS filmed their B album review video, which was uploaded to Bangtan TV on December 8th. Thus, these 7 brief, less than 4-minute videos posted in February actually telegraph multiple time spans and moments, alluding to December 19th, December 8th, and even December 5th when the 2020 Melon Music Awards show actually aired. Now, these are still broadcast dates, to say nothing of when they were actually filmed, which might be in November or even earlier. To use the terms from narrative theory introduced earlier, the posting dates of Bangtan TV are the discourse, whereas ARMY, which is BTS's fanbase, is always trying to extract the story timeline of when the events actually occur based on the visual information contained in the videos. I will wrap up this point with 2 more examples, both taken from BTS's long-form content. So their reality show travel series In the Soup, in which they go and spend some time in a forest, and the Run BTS episodes, which is their long-standing, long-running variety show. Now, in the first episode of In the Soup, which was broadcast on August 19th, 2020, it indexes many of the things I've been discussing so far, such as the signaling of multiple temporalities. The episode opens with a caption that tells us this scene occurred sometime in early May. There's not a definitive date. And we see the 7 members sitting in the Big Hit Music waiting room, all wearing coordinating Fila outfits, brainstorming for what they should do during their time away in the forest. In the background, we can glimpse the portrait, it's this huge picture of Jimin taken by Jungkook from episodes 104, 105, and 106 of Run BTS, which aired June 16th, June 23rd, and June 30th, respectively. Fans at the time of the broadcast who watched those Run BTS episodes earlier in the summer will recognize and know the context for why there is this giant portrait of Jimin in the waiting room when this initial In the Soup episode was filmed. More recent viewers in 2021 will also recognize from the January 26th and February 2nd episodes of Run BTS that the Fila outfits and the hairstyles from the Lucky 7 Run BTS episodes, which were episodes 126 and 127. So, in this opening scene alone of In the Soup, we have at least 3 different temporal moments glossed. We had May 2020, which is when the episode was filmed. We have June 16th, 23rd, 30th, 2020, when an earlier Run BTS episode was filmed. And we also have August 19th, when this episode is broadcast. This May timeline is further developed as the episode progresses when we see the members playing Suga's second mixtape title track, Dichita, during their car drive, which further narrows down the time frame in May. As we know, Suga's album was released on May 22nd. We also get a glimpse of Jungkook and RM discussing the lyrics to Still With You, Jungkook's self-composed single that he released on June 4th, 2021 for their Festa celebration. So within the first 15 to 20 minutes of this episode alone, we have references and allusions to multiple moments in the BTS story timeline, creating a sense of a continuous and full world. These visual references reward fans who stay current with the constant stream of BTS content by allowing them to connect visual clues with older and existing content. So being an ARMY means continually navigating several timelines at once, as well as always processing a lot of visual, musical, lyrical, and narrative information. In that sense, to be a BTS fan is to hone skills of observation, analysis, synthesis, and interpretation, to be constantly cognitively engaged. I think big hit music is aware of such fan behavior, of how fans notice, analyze, and connect details. And I think such awareness is embedded in how they develop and release their content, which is most evident in the 2021 season of Run BTS. We see the asynchronous release of episodes alongside a meta-awareness of how ARMY engages with the show itself, which I will briefly summarize here. I'm starting with episodes 120 to 121, and I start with these episodes since it's the one that seems to be filled right around the Dynamite comeback, based on the members' hair colors, dating it around August 2020. This is the Mafia roleplay episode where the members were each given individual information and then had to guess what were the actual events and circumstances that led to the breaking of the ARMY bomb tombstone, which was the kind of big plot point in this episode. In a sense, this episode serves as a meta-commentary on what fans themselves do with BTS content. The members, playing specific roles, must analyze and piece together the actual story timeline based on their received partial clues. I want to highlight that a key aspect of the revealed clues is actually based on time, such as the one member being at this location at such and such a time. So given this partial information, the members must piece together, guess, and reconstruct an earlier sequence of events, like what fans do with BTS themselves. A month later, we have a single episode themed around the idea of BTS members acting as producers for Run BTS, thus brainstorming and sharing their ideas of what they could do this entire season. The ideas they come up with is listed in the slide, but I want to point out that faithful viewers who have been watching the Run BTS season so far will quickly recognize that the episodes released prior to this one are the result of this meeting. Based on Suga's hairstyle and color, this episode was probably most likely filmed early in 2020, maybe around the Map of the Soul 7 comeback period. And in this episode, V proposes a Mafia roleplay episode, which we just saw in episodes 120 and 121. Thus, when viewers see V presenting this idea, this moment, as well as the episode as a whole, functions as both a flashback, recalling the previous Mafia episode that just aired, and a flash forward or preview, as viewers can now anticipate whether the ideas shared in this episode will actually manifest in future episodes. Thus, when we get to episodes 120 and 130, where the members take on this long-term project of learning how to play tennis, we as viewers already know the context in which this activity emerged. The viewer's enjoyment of the Run BTS episode is now heightened by both awareness of the members' involvement in this season's production and anticipation for seeing whether their ideas will come to fruition. This is not a passive engagement of content, but a posture of active readerly engagement, which big hit music both mobilizes and cultivates. I want to conclude my presentation today with a few reflections on what my analyses suggest. First, my attention to how meaning emerges cumulatively through repeated encounters with BTS's music and content highlights the narrativity and textuality behind big hit music's release of BTS official content in and of itself. Much has been made about the transmedia storytelling of the Bangtan universe, a fictive, immersive world that uses the members' real names as parallel character names, thus contributing to fan engagement with the band. Yet what I demonstrate today is that this narrative thinking permeates the entire experience of engaging with BTS, not just in this explicitly fictional realm. Secondly, it points to fan interaction as a type of critical reading, an intellectual engagement in addition to the parasocial affective dimensions of fan intimacy. In his essay, The Reality Effect, narrative theorist Roland Barthes famously argues that the proliferation of details in 19th century realist description is simply there to signify the real versus actually referring to a lived material reality. Yet when we think of BTS images, lives, interviews, and even any release promotional photo, fans are always scanning and scouring for details that are indeed significant. They're wondering about their meaning, reviewing previous music videos and lyrics, and looking for clues of when it was actually filmed. So by engaging in the analysis of details, order, duration, and storyline, fans participate in a type of narrative analysis of the BTS's members' lives beyond their music, which is enabled by big hit music's asynchronous release of content. While there's certainly emotional attachment and identification for fans, what I am honing on here is something more structural and formal. These repeated encounters and the asynchronous release of content. Now, I want to be clear that being able to identify the structural elements by which big hit music increases, facilitates, and mobilizes fans' intellectual engagement does not detract from or diminish the affective attachments, investments, and projections that fans have towards BTS. If anything, it shows how models that only read these interactions in economic terms are too reductive or simplistic. Rather, BTS's global popularity illustrates the complex relationship between aesthetics and the economic market, where fans' enjoyment of their music is generative, affective, social, creative, and intellectual, both in the music and performances themselves, and in how big hit music releases their content. BTS enables multiple interpretive possibilities.